And John, you're going first, right?
Yeah, I'll introduce you guys, and then I'll turn it over to you after the introductions.
Welcome to the NAEFA Diversity and Inclusion webinar, Engaging Women as Advisors and Clients. This is Brendan Burnett, Director, Professional Development, and today's webinar is being recorded. You may type questions that will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. It is now my pleasure to introduce John Wheeler, NAEFA Trustee and Trustee Liaison to the NAEFA Member Benefits Committee. John, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. As Brandon said, this is John Wheeler, one of your NAEFA National Trustees, and I will be serving as your moderator this morning. I'd like to welcome you to our continuing series of NAEFA webinars on diversity and inclusion. Today we're joined by two individuals representing one of our NAEFA Federation partners, MassMutual, who will be presenting on MassMutual's ProGrowth movement, engaging women as advisors and clients. So it's my privilege today to introduce our two presenters, Don Otto and Michelle Pettigo. Don is the Vice President of Human Resources and is the HR lead supporting MassMutual financial advisors, enabling large-scale change toward unified business model and culture are expected key outcomes. Prior to this assignment, Don was the HR leader supporting MetLife Premier Client Group and the broker-dealer, supporting their strategic HR strategy, providing decision support across agency system regions in the firms and home office departments and across the broker-dealer. Prior to joining MetLife, he was the HR VP at the Hartford, holding positions as HR VP for the group benefits business, the HR VP for the wealth management business, and VP of talent acquisition at Hartford Life. He worked in HR roles in packaging project companies prior to entering the industry. He has a bachelor's and master's degree from the University of Delaware and a master's degree in human resources development from the American University in Washington, D.C. Also, we have with us Michelle Pettigo, Vice President of the South Region of MassMutual Financial Advisors, who brings us with over 20 years of experience. She assumed the role in July of 2016 as a part of MassMutual's acquisition of MetLife's Premier Client Group. Over the past 10 years, she has provided strategic sales leadership focused on recruiting, retention of professional advisors, consulting with general agents on business development, and strong local value proposition. Also, during her early tenure at MetLife, she served as National Director, Distribution Partners for MetLife Resources, and led a wholesaling team that supported MetLife, New England Financial, Tower Square Securities, and Walnut Street Securities distribution channels with sales of annuities. She has a diverse background as well, with a master's degree in education from Western Kentucky University, a Bachelor of Science degree in business administration, graduating magna cum laude from Georgetown College. She is also a published author who has served national education associations and as a panelist for the U.S. Department of Education. She currently serves on the board of Life Happens and is an active member of Women in Financial Services, the Association of Advanced Life Underwriters, AAOU, and GAMMA. She is also active in her community, where she served on the Barron County Board of Education, now serving on the local board of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, as well as volunteering with local schools and her church. So with that, I'd like to introduce Michelle to kick off our meeting today. Michelle?
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for those kind introductions. We're excited to be here today to really share a little bit about the pro-growth movement at MassMutual, but also more significantly to give information about how potentially the audience could leverage this information to really ensure that they have a cultural fit for the future in our industry. We think this is one piece of the future of our industry, if you will. And so if we step back, first let's say, well, what is pro-growth? What does that mean? We've begun to call it a movement at MassMutual, and the reason we call it a movement is it's really been a grassroots effort where we're working with multiple audiences, and I know in various agencies, various firms, again, you have multiple audiences whether it be advisors, agents, sales managers, sales leaders, who really contribute to the overall culture and the overall go-to-market strategy, if you will. So Don and I stepped back about 18 months ago and said, there's some key facts here that would create a business imperative to establish a movement around attracting women to our industry, helping them to be more successful in our industry, and then helping them either be traditional or non-traditional leaders in our industry as we face off to what our clients, really the way clients are wanting to buy these days. If we really think about, there's not a lot of interest for transactional business. Clients want a relationship, and at the same time, they want someone who can understand them, who can understand, I call it cradle to grave, their needs. And with all of this in mind, and some of the facts I'm going to talk about, we determined that a movement needed to be started with multiple leaders and a grassroots effort. So what kind of facts do we look at to start with? Well, first, we realize, and this is an industry statistic, there's going to be over $60 trillion in motion in the next 20 years. So that is due to death or due to generational wealth transfer over time. As that money goes in motion, over 60% of the time industry-wide, it's the first fact, the current advisor gets fired upon the transfer of that wealth, either by the widow or the children. And a lot of times they will cite, well, I was never involved in that relationship with my father. I'm not sure I want my father's, the image that I have about my father's life insurance agent. I want someone who thinks more holistically. I want someone who engages me across my lifetime. And we, male, female, or any age, can learn from that. So we said that's one reason to have the business imperative, to really not lose that money as it goes in motion. And then also to think about our business in a more holistic approach, again, delivering our solutions in a way that the client wants to buy. So as we've crossed over our last 18 months, we had some questions that we ask ourselves throughout the journey. The first one was, are we missing a market? Are we missing a recruiting market? People that we could be recruiting into our business that we're really not taking a hard look at. We learned that 80% of our referrals 80% of our appointments in the people we appoint come from referrals from advisors. Well, if 82% of our advisor population are men, then that means that most people refer people that look like them, think like them. And so our referral base tends to be skewed more toward that 80%. So are we missing a market? The other one is, do we have a culture that attracts women to the advisor and field leadership roles? And our learning there was really, we got to get the culture right before we just say recruit a bunch of women in and we'll figure out how to keep them once we get them here. And so that was one way that this is not like, how is this not like all the other sort of diversity initiatives you've heard of? It's not just focused on recruiting women, but it's focused on a culture and understanding of what women need to be successful before we just bring a bunch of women in. It's also not a traditional model, but it involves different types of people leading along the way as people learn new and different things and help us learn. So for example, from one of our women advisory board members, we learned that potentially our training and development programs were not as friendly to women. Our examples of instructors that we put in front of people were all males, were all white males, and they taught to sell the way they sold naturally, which is not always the way women sell. So we needed to step back and take a different approach to training. Not that all of the training was bad, but again, trying to step back and take a look and make sure that we're inclusive in our approaches to training and development, recruiting, etc. So those are some of the things we've learned. And as we go along, we're also going to be sharing with you what makes our approach distinctively different from some of the other ways that even Don and I have tackled diversity and inclusion along the way. So really, cultural competency for the future. That's one of our goals, is thinking about where the puck is going and how people want to buy, and what is our sales force, what does our distribution model need to look like to help people not only buy their first life insurance policy, but be involved with us all along the way across the milestones of their life and across the milestones of their families. And then we wanted to make sure that we reflect, this is another goal, the face of America, to ensure that we all remain relevant as a solution to Americans' plight with life insurance and with also financial planning. So if those are the facts, those are the questions, and that's our goal, those are our goals, and we've kind of talked about what the movement is, just one more level setting. We really believe this movement is, if we're going to create change, it's about the head and the heart. And what we mean from that is to have change, to create change, you have to think about not only the statistics behind it, but the emotion and the heart within it as well. So first and foremost, we've already talked about what is the growth of the economic power of the female purchaser. So earlier we were talking about more the female salesperson, the advisor. Now we're talking about the market itself and how that's growing. These are just some of the statistics that are out there now. Women control over 11 trillion in investable assets. 40% out earn their spouses. They control 83% of all consumer purchases because now they're in the sandwich generation. Their children get their advice on financial purchases. Their spouses and significant others get their advice, as well as their parents. And then obviously the transfer of wealth that is happening. And by 2030s, women are expected to control 2/3 of the nation's wealth. So we kind of stepped back and said, wow, there is a business imperative for this movement. And so we got to get to the head and the heart to be able to make this happen. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Don, and he's going to share a little bit of the current state of the industry. So if we say this is important, and we've got clients out there who need more women in our industry, where are we today? So Don, I'll flip it to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that. And thank you for having us today. One interesting point on the current state of the industry, I think, is that females are in the advisor population at about 18%. That's in the industry, and it's also in our company. So, and we, Michelle and I both, as we have worked together, have not really seen an appreciable change in that over time. And we thought that we could actually impact that. And because of that missing market, with a few changes, we thought we could make that happen fairly quickly. In addition, the female sales manager population is really has been stagnant as well at about 8%. And recently, when MassMutual combined with MetLife Premier Client Group, we began to consolidate by market, firms within markets, so that we face the market in a consistent way. And through that process, we didn't help that representation mark at all. In fact, we probably didn't help it and made it go the other way. And so, as Michelle said, when we kind of got together and looked at each other, part of it was that our business processes were not helping as we combined our forces. And then finally, the firm leader population in our model, which is an independent contractor model for GAs, we had very low representation in that leadership role. And so, from a cultural standpoint, from the way we go to market, If the GAs and the sales managers are still primarily male oriented, male dominated, you find that you're not displaying, to potential candidates that you really are different because you also look different. And so we wanted to make some changes there. On the next slide, I'd like to speak a little bit about our organizing principles, because this is where Michelle and I and Paul Appiana, our channel leader, began to work together with John Vaccaro to start to try to do some things different. And I think one of the most interesting aspects of this is the fact that we decided to use not the traditional business model for change, which is leaders decide what we're going to do and set up metrics and drive behaviors and hold people accountable. Because of the independent contractor model and because of the nature of this change, we decided really to use a community organizing model. So we thought we had an energetic force that was interested in this, and we needed to empower them to do some things differently. And then we needed to create the right number of leaders, one person at a time, to begin to work with that energy force, if you will, to begin to make change and to listen to it, to become aware themselves and to be receptive and build the right culture so that that energy can be exhibited in some change. So some of the principles were culture before recruiting. We did need to change some very basic cultural aspects of the way our firms operated, most of which Michelle already referred to. And we really wanted to avoid those past efforts that we've all experienced in the industry where we have some metrics around the number of women we want to put into the advisor population, and we can make that happen because we'll incentivize it, and then because we haven't changed the culture, everything goes back to where it was, square one, in a very short amount of time. That requires patience. It requires leaders that will give us the time to make that change and get a head start on it. And we were lucky enough to have that in John Vaccaro and Paul Appiana. Michelle already talked a little bit about the head and the heart, but real change doesn't occur, or lasting change can occur when you use both the emotion, the intellect, and the doing of every person that's in your channel. And so we've tried to focus on all three aspects of the person in doing that. But again, it occurs one person at a time. So you gain a convert, that person influences others, you gain other converts, and we count them one at a time. And they're in all different areas. So you can find them in support people, you can find them in advisors, you can find them in sales managers and firm leaders. And there are, in fact, many leaders. So when people take the initiative, have the courage to do something different, we want to reward that and celebrate that and reinforce that and thank people for doing that. As long as they stay in the rails of our project and don't get a little bit too far ahead of us or fall too far behind, we want to let people go. So it takes a little leadership patience as well to be comfortable with people who take initiative and move forward because we know they're doing it for the right reasons. The other thing that we learned actually in 2018 was that in a sales culture, results speak. And so to give women the proper voice in the firms so that they can be advocates for us and continue to push for change, but also to remove the barrier where a GA, for example, might say, I'm really not sure I want to invest all the time and the money for bringing on an advisor who may not be producing at the same level on average as our male advisors are. And we found that there is, in fact, a slight difference between the average male advisor in their production and the average woman advisor. Now, we think we can explain that away through a lot of cultural differences and some of the issues that we've been talking about. But what we wanted to do is make sure that that we understood that. And so in 2019, we're going to be doing quite a bit more in terms of focusing on supporting women and helping them grow their practices in their unique way, so that we can close that gap and allow women to have the voice that they need in the firm itself. So I'll go through our 2019 initiatives, and then I'll hand it back over to Michelle. So our 2019 ProGrowth strategic initiatives are very similar to what they were in 2018. The regional advisory boards that we had established, so each of our 6 regions has a regional vice president who leads that region. Michelle is one of those for us in the South. And the regional advisory boards are made up of approximately 15 women from all the firms in that region. And they come together to learn about what we're trying to do, for us to learn from them as to what we should do, and then to also add a theme of either advocacy for the change, or, as I said, in 2019, to begin to work with them on closing the gap. So we're going to provide them a little bit more specific training in terms of what it takes to close the gap. They'll give us feedback on that, and then we'll bring that to broader audiences through the course of this year. In 2018, we started a GA study group of 10 GAs in our system. We tried to get people who have respect among other GAs, and that group has been meeting to build the same kind of awareness and knowledge, so that they're emotionally connected, intellectually connected, and they're starting to do some things because they're in a leadership role and people are watching them. So we're moving that group forward, and then other groups will come with them. So, for example, during the course of this year, we've had other GAs kind of step up even outside of the study group to see what they could do, because the study group was building a business plan for ProGrowth, each of them in their 10 areas. Of course, we told our regional advisory boards that. Those women advisors went back to their GAs and said, hey, those people are doing something. What can we do? And in one case, for example, one of the GAs sat down with that regional advisory board and said, you know what, let's put a goal together to change our culture enough that we'll have 20 women advisors by the year 2020. So that's not a super aggressive, add lots of people right away. That was change the culture, make this happen the right way, and by 2020, we'll have 20 women advisors. Now, they started with a very small number initially, and you can see that really that's the kind of thoughtful change that we were hoping for. That's someone becoming a leader and taking the initiative on their own, which we're really excited about. In 2018, we had a women's sales forum, but we broke it up into 2 parts, a West and an East. They had kind of similar agendas and similar speakers and topics. And this year, we're going to try to create a lot more consolidation of that by having one and have everybody come together, where there's a lot more networking possible, a lot of energy that's created, and that will blossom back out into the channel itself, into each of our markets. So we're pretty excited about having that. We can also get really good speakers, a good location that will add to the panache of that event. We do have goals, metrics-based goals, and in the case of having female sales leaders, we really do feel over time that reflects the fact that your culture is in fact different, that people do think about things differently, that we have advocates, that we have leaders who have a voice that may be contrary to the old culture, that start to build the new culture that we're looking to have. So we want to onboard 5 to 10 new female sales leaders in 2019, and we've already made progress against that, and we think we're going to break through that pretty quickly. And the other piece that I really wanted to describe for you is, because we have a corporate structure and our channel is inside of a corporate structure, the partner alignment with the individuals in home office who provide marketing support, who provide recruiting support and training design support, All those individuals are people that create a surround sound messaging that we can, when we influence them to start to look at their own programs through the lens of pro-growth, we begin to influence them to make those changes. And while we talk about it, the GA study group leaders talk about it, the Paul Aviana talks about it in larger platforms. When our partners come in and provide, for example, a recruiting process that supports women in a particular market, they see that we mean business because they're hearing it from everywhere, both their direct line leaders and their support staff, that we really do intend to make this change.
Don, great job there. Let me just take a step back too. I know some of you may be having some questions around these strategic initiatives and what were some aha moments. So I'll just peel back a few of those before we step off to the partner alignment and communication. I'd say first, let's go to the top with the regional advisory boards. One of the goals of the regional advisory board this year in 2018 was to really help women help their world become smaller, because if you think about 18% of our sales force are women. They, with detached locations and diversified firms across a large geography.
Looks like we lost Michelle a little bit.
Frozen up.
John, have you been fielding questions that when Michelle gets back, we'll be able to connect with her? But
yeah, I've got, I have a few questions here. One of them was that you had indicated in your grassroots movement, a number of informal leaders had been created for the movement. Could you speak a little more of how that was done?
Yeah, so when we go to, for example, we've had a series of meetings with the support groups at home office. I'll start there. And in the home office areas, we asked them to come together, hear our message, and ask them what it was that they could do. And they came back to us with specific plans in their field of influence. So if they were marketing people, we really felt like the marketing people responded tremendously with programs around approaching the women's market. And also in the marketing plans using social media, for example, and how women can take best advantage of social media and other functions like that. So home office people really responded well and became leaders themselves. And then in the firms, we were really trying to, through the regional advisory boards, trying to help women become a leader, feel more empowered to become a leader and a thought leader in their firm. So as they became more informed and more confident through their interactions with the regional vice presidents in the regional advisory boards, we asked women, specifically women advisors, to go back to their GAs and start the conversation, and maybe even start an advisory board in their firm and bring the GA along in terms of their awareness and thoughtfulness around the pro-growth subjects.
Okay. We just had another question come in that maybe you can address while Michelle's trying to get back. And that was, is MassMutual's percentage of 18% women advisors representative of the industry at large?
It is. It is. As we've looked at that, there may be, that means a few companies may be a little bit higher and a few may be lower. But it's interesting because in terms of raw numbers, we're a pretty big channel, and we have 1,500 women advisors in our system. So we have a really strong, solid base to start with. And our belief is that strong women advisors may be our best recruiting source. And so we're trying to unleash them to, let people know, if you will, that, through their presence in the marketplace, that they're an attraction force unto themselves.
Okay. That, I think, speaks a little bit to another question that we had come in here. And what are you currently doing to help advisors recruit more female clients?
Yeah. So I would say that's something that in 2019 we're going to be moving forward on. But one of our GAs was able to describe for us his journey. In fact, he made a presentation at our West Women's Sales Forum this year. But he was saying, in fact, in his firm, he didn't have a women sales leader, but he had the good fortune of recruiting some very strong women advisors who were known in the marketplace, and they became attraction factors themselves. And so while he was he found himself in a very fortunate position, his smart move was to have hired some very strong women advisors to start with.
Yeah. So in other words, success attracts success regardless.
Yep.
Here we have another question that just came in. What kind of changes
Hi, John.
do you make to your training programs? Are you back with
Hi,
us?
John.
Oh, okay.
I am by phone. We haven't gotten the presentation back up. I'm waiting for another link from Emily, but I am by phone. I apologize. I just went dead.
Right. Yeah. So John, why don't you ask Michelle?
We were addressing some questions that had came in just in the process.
Perfect.
As I said, the last question that just came in is what kind of changes has been made to your training programs as a result?
Don, you want me to take that one, or you got it?
Please. Go ahead, Michelle.
So we are currently evolving those changes. As you know, anytime you have a movement, it takes time. And that was really our goal in this whole thing, was its evolution over time. So one of the first things we did is we went back to our outside contractor who does a lot of our training, provides a lot of our virtual training, and said, can we work with you to have more female presenters, successful salespeople who would be in front of the audience to deliver this training? So that's the first thing we did. And that was really because a regional advisory board member said, hey, I was doing this virtual training and I could not find a female presenter across multiple offerings. And so we took that back, we massaged it, we worked with our center. Second thing, we went to another provider of training and shared what we were looking for as far as a little bit less transactional in our sales process, a little more holistic in nature, also thinking about how women go to market, how women sell, how women engage their clients, how female clients want to be engaged with. And they provided for us a 4-part series that we're actually leveraging now, again, with our GA cohort, our GA study group, our General Agent Study Group, to try on with their female sales advisors. That's different in how it's delivered. It's different in how you position for the close. So far, our female advisors have said, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. And the ones who have used it, and we're actually continuing to evolve and roll that out over some other firms where they self-select. And so that's really the two things. And then the third thing is we're very thoughtful about our sales leader development. So and how we can engage them in the ProGrowth movement. So coming out of our GA cohort, the GAs raised their hands and said, hey, I'm starting to get this head and heart thing, but I'm looking for I'm looking for how I can help my sales manager. So can you help me do that? And So we designed, which we will be delivering in the first quarter, a sales manager development. So again, that's training. And that's the group that interacts most with the advisors, especially advisors newer to the business. They also recruit advisors newer to the business. And they need to get their head around and their heart around this movement, because I had an example this morning. A leader had said to, or consistently says to recruits, I can show you how to make $1 million. And to our millennials and our women, that's not always motivational.
Right.
What's potentially more motivational is I can show you how to impact a lot of lives and a lot of families. And so how we position the impact we have on people as our industry is significant in how we do that. So we're developing sales managers around bias, unintentional bias, around recruiting, and around coaching. As our advisors are more advocates for us, then they will help us recruit more as well.
You know, John, just to add on to that a little bit, in our study group, we learn a lot about the pressures that GAs are under, and as we start to communicate and have a more open relationship. And one of the interesting factors was that as they become more attuned to this issue, et cetera, they either sometimes now they really understand it and want to do something about it, but they don't know what to do first. Or sometimes they do know what to do first, and then they need to get other advocates in their firm and create the same kind of awareness and interest in the subject. And then they struggle a little bit with how to build that next level of advocacy. And so that's a lot of where the sales manager training design that Michelle just talked about came from, was the openness of our GAs who began to ask for a little bit of help.
Thanks, Don. We just had another question come in. As a female advisor, how can I get involved with this initiative?
Well, this is a Mass Mutual initiative, a movement. So if you're at Mass Mutual, we'd love to hear from you. If you're not, I would say step back. You know, I've been a female in this industry since 2002. And one of the things that is interesting to me is, as Don and I've talked about, we have not necessarily grown the percentage of women over time in this industry. So if you step back and you say, why is that? One of the things women can do is identify in their own business, if they're advisors, in their own business model, where are my where am I, do I need more capacity? So if I really, as I look at my, overall business plan, do I really need help in marketing? Do I have a bunch of clients that I'm not providing overall long-term engagement with? What are my needs and my capacity with my business? And then can I bring a second female into my business model to help me grow my business, develop a succession plan potentially, and also to help them get into the business? So you're basically mentoring them first, helping them to know about the business and how we're making impact, and then bringing them into the business more in a, what I would call a marketing assistant or a sales assistant role as they're learning, to then evolve to an advisor over time, which helps you grow your practice, but also helps them get into the business and develop a practice. And potentially you'll be partners, or you could separate and develop your own businesses as well. But we believe mentorship, sponsorships, advocacy help bring more women into the business, as well as, I would say, the other piece is continuing to hone our own crafts so that we, become more and more successful in this industry.
Thanks, Michelle. I know that both of you indicated how successful the Women's Advisory Board and the forums had been. If an organization is considering something of that nature, how would you suggest that they approach it, number one, and what type of budget needs to be allocated from a reasonable standpoint to be able to start at least beginning to do something of that nature?
You know, John, I think the first part of that answer is you need a sponsor. And so at whatever level that advisory board might be, whether it's in the firm or whether it's at a regional level, or even at the entire channel level, you do need a leader sponsor who understands what's happening, is interested in the subject and the business imperative, thinks it can make a difference, and then wants to take action and appreciates that it's not going to be an easy road. And so, you know, they'll be hearing some things they don't want to hear, or they'll be pushed in directions they hadn't thought about before. And our, you know, your sponsor leader needs to be willing to step up to that. And so I would say, as we had done, try to start small with lower expectations, built around some basic things that could help women current women advisors be more successful, or to attract new women advisors to build more revenue for the firm or the channel.
Thanks, Dan.
And then I would offer just one other thing on that. You can have an advisory board, or you can have a study group. And the study group is really led by female advisors at your agency or your firm. And you can go down that path as well, and specifically in the name to grow the business and grow your practice. And everybody sets goals and, you know, work through those throughout the year. Focus more on how am I growing my individual practice. So you can have that, as well as the advisory board. We really wanted, as Don spoke about in general, is we really wanted to hear from them on what we needed to change. We wanted to test some ideas with them, and we wanted to create community so that they didn't feel alone and they could help us advocate for this. So in all of those options, we always came at it as, what's our structure? How can we continue to give people a voice and give them an opportunity to speak so that it continues to evolve the movement?
Yeah, and the individuals, John, need to have, at a certain point, need to have the feel enabled or have the courage to bring some of those suggestions to that executive sponsor to say, hey, we've been talking about some things, and here's a couple aspects, small as they may be, that would help us to be more successful. And offer them as suggestions to the sponsor, who can then begin to take action with them. So it's sort of work within ourselves, but then move out and make some suggestions that can change the bigger whole.
At the end of the day, it's all about identifying first and being realistic, and then moving forward. And here at NAIFA, we've done our best to try to recognize this issue. We thank our partners for being involved with this. We thank you guys for participating today and sharing your wisdom and your experience. We thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I don't have any other open questions at this point. Okay, if not, thank you again very much, Michelle and Don, for your participation today, and thank you, Mass Mutual, for being continued partner with NAIFA in our efforts to bring forth diversity and inclusion within the industry.
Thank you, John. Before we let our panelists go, did we perhaps want to summarize the future culture change opportunities, since we do have a few minutes to get to this last slide at this point?
Sure. Would you like to speak to that a little more?
Looks like we may have lost Michelle again.
I think she's on the phone.
Can you hear me?
I think we've got her
there
back.
you are.
There she is.
Now you're back.
There I am. All right. Goodness. I don't want to think if that's user error or not, so we'll not think that. Sure. Let's just quickly talk about a couple of future change opportunities. One is we are consistently looking at opportunities focusing on lifting the entire industry. Opportunities, partnerships such as this one today with NAFA. We're also working through other partnerships across AAOU and potentially CAMA, looking at how we can, again, help people think about their own organizations, think about how we can get, the research says 30% of any group of people, if you have a minority there, when you get to 30%, that's when you start to really evolve the change. So we're looking to how we can do that in the industry, how we can do that in smaller organizations as well. We talked a bit about advisors as recruiting advocates. We believe that as we get the culture right through, again, the GA study groups, through the advisory boards, through the working with leadership, you know, one of the things we've also talked about is being very thoughtful about our agency and firm level experiences, our trips, our things we do together, our social events. Someone's knee-jerk reaction might be, well, I got that covered. I got a spa day. Well, that almost makes me chuckle inside because that really doesn't solve for the inclusion. You know, I got a golf day, I got a spa day. But really thinking about, okay, what are those experiences that would help advisors can come together for a larger cause? Maybe something that's impactful to the community, something that's impactful to the firm. Obviously, around the holidays, people are doing a lot of things like that. But what is something that people can show up to and bring their whole self? And that really then helps them be included. I had a sales manager, I'll just tell this quick story, sharing as a best practice their poker night. And all well-intended, didn't think a thing about it. And I know there are women who play poker, but by and large, that's not a traditional female event. So I just simply said, well, how many of your female advisors are there? And he said, well, some do come. And I said, do they play? And he said, no, they just sit on the sidelines and watch. And I said, so let's think about that. When do you like to go to an event where you feel like you should be there, but then when you get there, you really don't want to participate? And we had a great conversation, and that was sort of one of those one bulb at a time conversations where he kind of grinned and said, okay, I get it. I don't know if they still have poker nights or not, but that's just an example of working towards something more inclusive, like, you know, gathering food for a food bank, or going to work in a local school over the holidays, or to help with some type of maintenance issue, or whatever you come up with, something that people can bring their whole self to that event. We've already talked about sales managers recruiting to the missed market. We also understood that the comp and benefits plan opportunities, there could be some opportunity to talk more about family leave opportunities. For us, there was an opportunity to help story better. What we learned is female advisors, because we're at 18%, because the age difference across the demographic, potentially we don't have a lot of maternity leave. But when we do, there's potentially no one at the firm who is well versed in what that means for the female advisor. So let's just help them shore up their knowledge and be able to look at a female advisor in the eye and say, I am so excited for you and your family, and this is a really great thing, and we're going to help you transition to maternity leave and help you transition back. We've also talked about the training evolution, and then finally, the recruiting value prop and the internship focus. I shared a little bit about that, and I would just share with you these 6 key female value statements as you think about each of these change opportunities. One is females want to have a voice. They like flexibility and balance. They really appreciate making an impact. They like to think about a career path. They want transparency, and they want an innovative culture. Now, if you step back and you think about those, having a voice, flexibility, making an impact, career path, transparency, innovation, that goes right along with our friends, the millennials as well, who I hope some are on the call today. I joke, I turned 50 this year, and I say that we talk about millennials like they're never coming to our industry, and actually the oldest are 35. And so we do want to shore up our culture to engage all ages, all types of diversity. And we believe our ProGrowth movement is a way to just step back and think about culture, think about a movement, think about grassroots, and think about many leaders as we really work to impact the industry and impact our experience for our clients over time. So I believe, Don, unless you have another parting thought as far as conversations we've had or change that's occurred over the 17 and 18, I'll turn it back to you for any closing remarks.
Don?
Great.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said John. So, so I'm going to.
John.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing I think for the entire industry is, there's very low recognition of our career in say women of college age, and we're competing on the college campus with accounting firms and financial companies or companies in another industry that are looking for the talented woman on the campus. And so we've also begun to think, and this is really a way that we can join forces with our industry professional groups to start our recruiting or our recognition and awareness programming earlier in people's lives. So if we can move onto the campus, for example, and start to incorporate young women into internships and practicums that where they work in a local agency and they begin to understand the opportunity here in this career, which is much different and more unique and in many ways more impactful than a career working in a corporate environment, where they're actually working with people whose lives they change, and build that knowledge base earlier. We think that will over time lead to a better recruiting opportunity for the firms when we're looking for advisors. There's other career paths that people can enter, as Michelle had alluded to earlier, around being part of an advisor team, coming in a service or support role, and then growing into an advisor type role. All of those things, the agency can help build some of that capability and move those individuals into advisor roles. They can come on and join us in partnership with an advisor directly. But we have to build a better pipeline of interested women who understand our industry and the opportunity that they can have to be successful here.
Thank you, Don. And, as I said, NAIFA is continuing to hopefully try to bring awareness that one day our industry is going to look much more like the communities that we all serve, both from male versus female, transgender, whatever might be the situation, people of color, whatever. Because we find that it's often easier for people to relate to someone that they feel is more relatable. And I think as an industry, we need to do a better job in outreaching to that. And that's one thing that we're striving to do with our partners such as you and so on. And once again, we can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with the group. And we look forward to partnering for years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Brandon?
John.
Thank you. This concludes the webinar, and we appreciate John and both of our panelists today, and thank you all the participants also for joining us today. This concludes the webinar.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we're good.
I have
Thanks,
no
Don.
idea.